Commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
The big moment finally arrives. Yes, folks, she appears. The mother of Michael Jackson's children testifies at last. She weeps on the witness stand, but does Jackson's ex, at least the one who testified in court, leave the defense or the prosecution in tears ultimately? Hello, I'm James Curtis. Welcome to E's coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. Waving at his adoring fans, the King of Pop arrives at the courthouse all decked out like Sean Chapman, Holly, and Ricky Kleeman, except he had on a maroon suit, looking nonetheless dapper and clad. He was very aware of the cameras, apparently, but inside, Mr. Jackson faces a former Mrs. Jackson. Would this ex provide some startling and damning revelations about the King of Pop? Well, here's how she responded, at least initially, to questions by Assistant District Attorney Ron Zonin, according to the courtroom transcripts.
Do you prefer to be called Miss Rowe?
Debbie, please.
All right, but in court, we're a little more formal.
Oh.
In terms of surnames, do you go by Miss Rowe?
Yes.
Do you know the defendant, Michael Jackson, seated to my right with the long, dark hair?
Yes, I do.
How do you know Mr. Jackson?
We've been friends, and we were married.
When were you married to Mr. Jackson?
From 1997 to 1999.
For what period of time did you know Mr. Jackson prior to that?
Probably 20 years or more.
Were you friends with Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Are you the mother of his two children?
Yes, I am.
The two oldest children?
Yes, I am.
And their names are what?
Michael Joseph Jackson, Jr. and Paris Michael Catherine Jackson.
And when were you divorced from Mr. Jackson?
I believe October 1999.
Did you ever live with Mr. Jackson during the course of your marriage?
We never shared a home.
Did you live with Mr. Jackson prior to that marriage?
We never shared an apartment.
At the time that the marriage was dissolved, was there an understanding or an agreement as to child custody?
I'm sorry?
Was there an understanding or agreement as to child custody?
Yes.
And who had custody of the two children?
Michael did.
Did you have visitation of the two children?
Yes, I did.
And what was the extent of the visitation as determined by that divorce?
Every 45 days for 8 hours.
All right. Did you, in fact, see the two children every 45 days for 8 hours?
I tried.
Next, she may have tried to see her children, but you know, it cannot be easy being a former Mrs. Jackson.
All right. Were there difficulties in being able to do so?
Yes.
What kinds of difficulties?
There were times that the children and Michael would be out of the country. And I was working at the time, and if they were in South Africa, I would not have enough time to fly to where they were and then return home in time to be at work.
Were you able to make up that 8-hour period when they returned?
No. It was pushed off until the next 45 days.
For what period of time did that continue, that custody arrangement?
I believe 1.5 years.
At some point in time, did you voluntarily agree to give up parental rights as to those two children?
Yes.
And when was that? Can you tell us?
I believe 2001.
And why did you do that?
The visitations were not comfortable. We were hooked up at a hotel. I was, when I would bring things to do, finger painting, coloring, or whatever, the nanny was always very concerned with the children getting dirty. I would bring T-shirts or something to put over their clothes. And the environment was very sterile. It wasn't a quality relationship.
Did you ask to have more time with the kids?
Yes.
Objection, leading.
Overruled. The answer was yes.
Sorry.
Next question. That's all right.
And was that request granted?
No.
And tell me why you made the decision to give up parental rights as to the two children at that time.
I didn't believe that...
Objection, relevance, opinion.
Sustained.
At some point in time, when was the last time that you saw the two children?
2.5, 3 years ago. I'm not sure. I don't remember the dates.
All right, my job today, folks, is to hold you all back till we get to the next segment of discussion for the headline that's all over the place about what the effect of this testimony was ultimately. Sure. But let's just wait for that, if we can, please, and talk about what we have so far. So far, we have an ex-wife of Michael Jackson who's talking about the preliminaries, the nature of the relationship, the visitation, and the like.
And the visitation, if we take it just for what we've seen, sounds very bizarre. And I think that's exactly what the prosecution wants. She gets to see them 8 hours. She doesn't really get to play with them in any way that's going to soil them. If she misses her 8 hours, she doesn't get it back. It's strange. That's the picture the prosecution wants to paint.
That's right. That is the picture the prosecution wants to paint. But the point is, what is the relevance of this? How does this tend to prove or disprove any issue or fact in the case? All it does is make Michael Jackson look weird and have this bizarre relationship with his ex-wife and with his kids. That's
does
all
it make him look controlling?
No. That's part of the presentation, however. The three things I want to say. First, notice the children are named after the parents. Michael Joseph and Paris Michael Catherine.
Yes.
Interesting. Secondly, the question is asked by the prosecution, and tell me why you made the decision to give up parental rights as to the two children at that time. Objection sustained. One of the few times the judge sustains an objection. That was clearly outside the lines of what was discussed.
Custody battle, custody
All of
issues
that.
have nothing
And
to do
yet
with this.
the question was asked solely to paint Michael Jackson as weird and controlling with no relevance.
It's actually interesting because the reports of people who were in that courtroom are very consistent as to one aspect, that Tom Mesereau was objecting, furiously objecting in a way that they had not seen before, because he was going to make sure that Debbie Rowe's testimony was confined precisely to the judge's ruling.
And indeed, the judge stated initially that with respect to this testimony, he was going to keep it very narrow as to what we call a proffer, an offer of proof in the opening statement, where Tom Sneddon says that this woman, Debbie Rowe, is essentially going to back up Ms. I can't say the last name. Gavin's mom. Got too excited, almost slipped. As testimony continues, we move to the rebuttal video. You'll hear the names Mark, Ronald, and Dieter. They were associates of Michael Jackson. You'll also hear that the king of pop put out an SOS.
Were you contacted by somebody with regard...
Mark Schaffel, yes.
Mark Schaffel called you?
And Ronald Konitzer.
You then had a conversation with Ronald Konitzer as well?
For a brief moment. Michael was with him.
Did Michael Jackson then get on the telephone?
Yes, he did.
Objection. Leading.
Overruled.
What did Mr. Jackson say to you in the course of this conversation?
He told me there was a video coming out, and it was full of lies, and would I help? And I said, as always, yes. I asked him if he was okay. I was very upset.
When was the last time you had talked with Michael Jackson?
The day of our divorce.
Now, he asked you for some kind of assistance, is that correct?
Yes.
What exactly did he ask you to do, if anything?
He asked if I would work with Ronald and Dieter to help him, and I said yes. And I asked him how he was, and I asked him how the children were, and I asked if I could see them when everything settled down.
What did he tell you?
He said yes.
All right. Had you had any communication with Mr. Jackson in the preceding period of time with regards to the children?
No.
Had you sent any letters to him at all requesting that you be able to see them at some point in time?
No.
Did you want to see the children?
Very much.
Next, this witness gets instructions from the man himself, the king of pop, and her former husband, Michael Jackson.
What did he tell you about what was going to happen?
That there was a bad video coming out. I did not... he didn't go into any more detail about that.
Did you ask him what it was about?
No.
Did you ask him if it dealt with him personally, Mr. Jackson?
I assumed it did.
Okay. Now, he asked you for some assistance. Is that correct?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
And did he describe to you in any detail or particularity what it was he wanted you to do?
No, he did not.
Okay. Did he tell you to follow anybody's direction?
He asked me...
Objection. Leading.
I'm sorry.
Sustained.
What did he tell you to do?
He asked me to work with Ronald, Dieter, and Mark.
Didn't tell her specifically what to say so far. Hold it, folks. Steady, steady. We're going to get there. Didn't tell her, at least so far, what to say in with any kind of specificity.
No, but here's the key. The tip-off to where she was going was when she said she was very upset when she got the call from Michael about the bad video.
Yes.
The minute you heard that, you knew that her testimony was, in my opinion, was not going to be negative to Michael.
It seemed that way.
And there's nothing inherently conspiratorial or sinister about this. He wants to do a video that's more positive than the Bashir video, and she's somebody who thinks he's a good person and good
But
father.
what about the idea, Ricky
that.
Kleeman, that he hasn't contacted this woman for literally years since their divorce?
Well, I'll give you two sides. Number one is on the side for the defense, she is very cooperative with him and she's thrilled to hear from him.
Yes.
On the side for the prosecution, what they're trying to bootstrap here is to say Jackson is in charge. He asked her to cooperate with his henchmen, Ronald, Dieter, and Mark.
Yes.
And they're trying to say that's exactly what happened with Gavin's mom.
And therefore, although the prosecution has yet to make a strong connection between the so-called unindicted co-conspirators being directed specifically by Michael Jackson, perhaps, just perhaps, that gives the prosecution and the jury a bit of that link. When we return, Debbie Rowe, friend or foe? The answer may surprise you. Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. You know, it's a little like the refrain from one of Michael Jackson's pop hits, one of my favorites actually, I'll Be There. Michael Jackson's ex, Debbie Rowe, comes apparently to the singer's rescue when he calls. Here's what the jurors heard according to the courtroom transcripts.
All right, let's go back to the conversation again with Mr. Jackson.
Okay.
Before you hung up the phone or before your telephone conversation ended, you said specifically about the children. Tell me what it was that he told you about the children with regards to visitation.
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
Go ahead.
When I said, "Are you okay? And are the children okay?" And he said, "Yeah, we're okay." And I said, "Can I see you and everything and the children when everything is over with?" And he said yes.
Did you want to see Mr. Jackson and the children?
Absolutely.
Did he give you any other direction as to when that might be?
Objection. Leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
No.
Did anybody offer you anything in response to your doing this?
Objection. Leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
Do you mean quid pro quo?
Yes.
No. I was excited to see Michael and the children when all of this was over.
Why did you do this interview?
I promised him that I would always be there for him and the children.
Quid pro quo. You go, Debbie Rowe. As we continue, the X Factor, tearful testimony from the King of Pop's former wife.
What was your expectation with regards to your children in terms of your completing this interview?
Objection. Leading. Foundation.
Sustained.
Did you have any expectations with regard to your kids at all?
Objection. Leading.
Overruled.
Yes.
What was that? What were your expectations?
To be reintroduced to them and to be reacquainted with their dad.
You wanted to be reacquainted with Mr. Jackson as well?
Yes.
Why?
He's my friend.
This is the testimony that made all the headlines. Unlike the prediction and indeed the prognostication from Sneddon in his opening statement that she would be just like Gavin's mom in the scripting and the coaching, not so.
Well, she says he's my friend, and she looks over at him, and she means it. And the result of that is, if the jurors like her, it spills right over onto Michael Jackson, and he is not a big bad man nor a child molester.
You know, this is a classic example of not knowing what your witness is going to say and probably not being properly prepared. Now, we don't know what the rest of her testimony is going to be, but I expect that the district attorney's office didn't think this was going to be the answer to their questions.
And you can only ask, did they interview her ahead of time? I mean, they couldn't have.
No, well, they must have.
Well, they must have, because what does Tom Sneddon say? Words to the effect from his opening statement, she's going to tell you that her interview was also scripted just like Gavin's mom. I'm paraphrasing a bit there, but that was the bottom line, folks. Next, Whether it's the rebuttal video or direct examination, Debbie Rowe seems to ignore everybody's script.
All right. Now, prior to the start of this interview, had you talked with anybody about the content of this interview? In other words, what was going to be asked of you?
No.
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence, leading and foundation.
Overruled. Do you want the question read back?
No. No, I did not want that.
Did you know what it was you were going to be saying?
No.
Did you know what it was, what questions would be asked of you?
No.
Did you know whether or not it had anything to do with this video or this television show?
All I knew, it was whatever was being put out about Michael could be hurtful to him and the children. And I don't know if I was supposed to run interference. I don't know what the basis was for my interview.
Did you ask him about the content of the television show?
No.
Did you ask anybody about the content of the questions that would be put to you?
Absolutely not.
And if that wasn't hitting the prosecution between the eyes enough, next, Debbie declares her independence.
Who is Ian Drew?
He was someone that was going to interview me.
And was he somebody you knew prior to that day as well?
No.
Did you have any preliminary conversation with him prior to the commencement of this interview?
Absolutely not.
Was that by your choice?
Yes.
And why is that? Why was that?
Objection. Foundation. 352. Leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
Go ahead.
Because I didn't want anyone to be able to come back to me and say that my interview was rehearsed, that someone told me what to say. Mr. Jackson knows no one can tell me what to say. I tend to speak my own mind, and I didn't want the interview to be construed as something other than what it was, which was a cold interview.
At some point in time, were you given any kind of a list of questions?
Objection.
Overruled.
It was offered to me, and I declined it.
Go.
Okay, yes, in the opening statement, the prosecution said what she was going to say. But even more recently than that, in the argument just the other day, he said what she was going to say, and she's saying the opposite of what he said she was going to say 2 days ago.
And I got to say this, no one can tell me what to do says it all. She's not going to let the district attorney's office push her around. She's going to answer truthfully as she recalls it.
But is there some subtle hint that I'm going to cooperate because I want my kids back, even though Michael doesn't promise that to me?
Well, someone who is cynical could certainly believe that. I've heard people on TV and the radio say the Jackson people must have gotten to her. He would have to be out of his mind. That's ridiculous. Pure speculation.
Yeah, well, we're going to see how that goes as time continues. Speaking of which, tick-tock, time is ticking away. Apparently for the prosecution, though. Is it too late for Debbie to drop the proverbial bombshell? Well, you stay with us and find out.
An arrest warrant for Mr. Jackson has been issued on multiple counts of child molestation. The bail amount on the warrant has been set at $3 million.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. Well, so far during her testimony, Michael Jackson's ex-wife, Debbie Rowe, hasn't exactly provided the devastating revelations that the prosecution was apparently hoping for. But under continued direct examination about her role in the now infamous rebuttal video, the mother of Jackson's children finally gives the prosecution at least a little bit of what they must have been hoping for. Here's how she responded to questions from Assistant District Attorney Ron Zonin, according to the courtroom transcripts.
Ms. Rowe, in the course of the interview that took place, I think you said over about the next 9 hours?
Yes.
Were you truthful in the answers that you gave?
Can you rephrase that?
Did you tell the truth? Did you answer all those questions truthfully and honestly?
No.
All right. Why is that?
Objection. Foundation. Opinion. Relevance.
Overruled. You may answer.
Why is that?
Because my personal life is my personal life and no one's business. And it pretty much doesn't matter. I could call something black. In the media, it will be called white.
Were you asked questions about Mr. Jackson?
Yes, I was.
Objection, leading, hearsay.
Overruled.
What questions that were asked of you about Mr. Jackson did you not give honest answers to?
Can you be more specific?
I can. Did he ask, were you asked questions about Mr. Jackson and his parenting of your 2 children?
Objection, leading, move to strike.
Overruled.
Did you understand the question? Would you like to hear it again?
Yes, I was asked the question.
May the court reporter repeat the question, Your Honor?
I think she understood the question, so...
I understood the question, and I said yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She answered your question.
I'm sorry. Were those the questions or among the questions that you did not answer honestly?
Objection, leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
Parenting, Ricky, that's the best they got? She didn't answer truthfully about Michael Jackson's parenting?
Well, that's the best they have thus far. Now, of course, we know that headlines in various websites and news outlets simply said that she lied on the witness stand. So it all depends on your perspective. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Well, she kind of summed it up when she described the media as if something's black, they could describe it as white or vice versa, and that's about as accurate as it gets with the reporting in this case.
That's true.
And I guess that the inaccuracy, if you will, about his parenting, if it was untrue, what she said about his parenting, is only relevant if it was scripted. If she wanted to say truthfully one thing and the script caused her to say something different.
But who
and
cares,
she's saying it
really?
wasn't
I have to take
scripted.
this issue. Who cares about his parenting? Is his parenting an issue in this trial?
If he's a bad parent, is he therefore a child molester? It does not connect.
Unless the goal is to make him look weird and odd so the jury will interpret everything in a negative light.
Are we going to see a different Debbie Rowe tomorrow on the stand?
You may.
Doesn't seem like she can be much different than this, but...
I mean, if she's radically different, that's bad for the prosecution, too, isn't it? It's like we worked on her overnight to get her to say what we wanted her to say.
You can't tell her what to do, you can't tell her what to say, and, you know, it'll be interesting to see what she says this afternoon.
Yes, it will. More jaw-dropping revelations tomorrow as Debbie Rowe continues her testimony. 7:30 right here. E's exclusive coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. Only on E, folks. You don't want to miss it. See ya.